Our News is brought to you by Alive.
Believe in best.
Welcome to our news on this majority rule holiday. I'm Jerome Sawyer sitting in tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, a call for Bahamians to get vaccinated as the government tries to cope with this latest surge of COVID cases. Prime Minister Philip Davis, in his first national address to the country last night, urged Bahamians to get vaccinated. He said the government anticipated this latest surge in COVID cases, but also noted that his government is doing its best to balance the health of the economy and the overall health of the Bahamian people.
Omicron appears to cause less severe disease generally, with reduced impact on the lungs. So in many places, it appears that fewer COVID patients require ventilation and ICU care than during previous surges.
The Prime Minister said the government will continue to distribute medical masks throughout New Providence, extending to the Family Islands as well. He also said that the free testing pilot launched in New Providence on Saturday would be expanded to 1,000 tests a day. All this as the unvaccinated are still at the greatest risk.
Nonetheless, our hospitals face a very serious threat. That's because there are still many thousands of unvaccinated Bahamians, and many will become infected with Omicron. This virus is going to hit our unvaccinated population very hard. Even though a smaller percentage will require hospitalization than with previous variants, remember how extremely contagious Omicron is.
Over the weekend, the country saw a record number of cases, with 818 reported for January 7th, the highest daily total since the pandemic began. Kids could be back in the classroom in as soon as 2 weeks, and 8 schools months away from completed repairs could be reopened a lot sooner. That's according to the Prime Minister and Education Minister, who led a tour of those schools under renovation today. Our Berthany McDermott was on that tour as well and files this report.
The government's goal is to reopen schools in 2 weeks, according to Prime Minister Philip Davis, who toured several public schools across New Providence today to get a first-hand look at the progress of repairs.
We are still aiming to have the school open within 2 weeks or as quickly as possible. Now, I'd like to speak to the children of our nation. I know that that you are anxious to be with your friends, to learn with your friends, and to interact with your friends. And that's the best means of learning, by being amongst people that you are comfortable with. I'm promising them that we'll get you back in the classrooms as quickly as possible.
In late December, officials announced that hybrid learning would be postponed for 2 weeks following an alarming increase in COVID-19 cases. Over 1,100 new cases were recorded over the weekend alone. Today, the Prime Minister was asked if it would be a good idea for students to return to the classroom amid a surge in cases.
The good news here is that the variant that is rampant does not, in fact, have the consequences as previous variants. And we are watching that, and we are analyzing it now. The medical team is analyzing the consequences of it. We do note, though, that we yet have vaccines for children.
However, Davis said the government is working to acquire vaccines for children. The government came under fire for the postponement of face-to-face learning, as many questioned why schools were closed while other sectors of society were allowed to open. Last week, a group of concerned parents urged the government to allow parents to choose between face-to-face and virtual learning. While noting that it's up to the medical experts, Davis gave this explanation.
If I were to give an educated guess, knowing that we don't have vaccines in the country for children, they are more susceptible to contracting the virus than those who would have been vaccinated. And if they were to contract the virus, the outcome would be far different than if they were in fact vaccinated. Do we take that chance with the lives of our children? I think not.
Speaking with reporters after touring Sybil Strawn Primary School, one of 8 schools she said was in dire need of repairs, Education Minister Glenys Hanna-Martin said it was originally slated to be completed in April 2022. However, that was expedited.
The contractor has been so diligent and excellent. If you look at the quality of work that's been done, we were aiming for the 11th of January, which we believe we would have been ready in every single school in this country. We didn't think so when we took office.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
As students and teachers await the next step, come tomorrow, they will once again log on to virtual platforms. Face-to-face learning has still not resumed thanks to the high COVID numbers. The president of the Bahamas Educators Management Union says he's hoping for a hybrid platform come next month. Our Jasmine Brown has more on that.
I'm optimistic that I honestly believe in February, whether hybrid or some other means, we're going to start engaging, because right now, today, on the 11th, preschools and nurseries, they will be fully open. Well, what is the difference? You know, and so the same situations that we can put in place to protect them, we can put in place to protect our own. So I remain optimistic.
Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in early 2020, Bahamian students have gone back and forth between virtual and in-person learning. During the last term, from September 2021 to December 2021, all public school students across the country engaged only in virtual learning. McPhee says in order for students to make a safe return to classrooms, people need to act responsibly to help curb the spread of COVID-19.
What the concern really should be is, how do we get people to be as responsible as possible with ensuring that the actions and the steps we take now could impact not only self but others? But I believe we're going to have to bring this bullet ahead and say, you know something, we're gonna have to engage. Because the reality is, I don't know how well or how much data we have in terms of where we're contracting COVID and how is it spreading, but I can tell you, I am more concerned about the shopping malls, the movie theaters, the food store, the churches, the other gatherings. And if we can do those, at least in a classroom, we could even exercise more control.
In November, Minister of Education Glenys Hanna-Martin said the non-participation in lessons by a large number of students was an emergency of sorts. Hanna-Martin has on numerous occasions highlighted the urgency of getting students back in the classroom to address the significant gaps resulting from the virtual learning environment. However, as a result of a sharp uptick in COVID cases, plans to begin the new school term this month in a hybrid system have been delayed, with government announcing that all schools across the country will have to use a virtual system. McPhee says the news did not come as a shock, as the Minister of Education has been keeping the unions well informed.
She has always reached out, either herself or the permanent secretary. And so I can say, to credit of the Minister of Education, the unions, all 4 unions in education, as you're aware, there is an additional teachers union that was newly formed, BECAU, and all 4 unions, the Public Service Union, BECAU, BUT, and BEMU, representing employees in the Ministry and Department of Education, was invited prior to a meeting where the minister would have first of all informed us of what the present situation was as guided by health officials, and then also at that point in time would have asked for recommendations or suggestions from us and agreement thereof or not, if whether or not we were supportive of the decision in view of what the present situation was.
Meantime, Bahamas Union of Teachers President Belinda Wilson has said she too understands the need to delay face-to-face learning. However, she continues to point out long-standing issues with students and teachers being unable to access virtual learning platforms. Reporting for Our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Well, there doesn't appear to be any slowdown in demand for this destination. In fact, resort operators want more airlift to meet the increase in bookings. It's a good problem to have, yet a problem nonetheless. Tourism and Aviation Minister Chester Cooper acknowledges the demand for more seats in and out of the country, even though they've seen the Bahamas added to more and more airline schedules. He admits they need more.
We have welcomed United recently from Cleveland. We've welcomed Frontier from Philadelphia and Orlando. American Airlines put on more flights. We now have 8 flights a week from London. We have Virgin Atlantic. We have British Airways have increased their offering of flights to the Bahamas. Air Canada recently came to Exuma. Based on the new variant, they've suspended that service, and that's understandable.
Atlanta's President Audrey Oswald recently spoke publicly to the issue, admitting that, guess what, more options. She's been raising this concern with insufficient flights since the pandemic started. Cooper gave this assurance, though, on behalf of the government.
We continue to work with our major partners, but in particular Atlantis, Bahama, and the Bahamas Hotel Tourism Association, to ensure that we are on the same page in terms of our key source markets, and we stand ready to increase airlift along with our airline partners as the demand arises. We're working with Frontier, we're working with Southwest, for example, and they stand ready to open new markets with direct services to the Bahamas.
Justices, magistrates and officers of the court officially get back to work this week as well with the official opening of the legal year. It's an opportunity to reflect and look ahead. Bar Association President Khalil Parker is disappointed that the Freedom of Information Act raised in his remarks last year still hasn't been enacted.
I think that if the funding and the attention were paid to it and the urgency was directed towards bringing it to fruition, we could have been further along. I am hopeful that we move the needle on that. I am not pleased that we are still where we are. I've spoken with the commissioner and his team. I am confident that they're doing their endeavor best.
Freedom of information was a 2017 campaign promise of the Free National Movement. Former Attorney General Carl Bethel promised that it would be enacted by 2020. The only progress to speak of was the appointment of retired Supreme Court Justice Keith Thompson and former Assistant Director of Legal Affairs Shane Miller as Freedom of Information Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner. That was in May of 2021. Parker says without the full support of the state, enacting it will take even longer. Last year, he insisted the public cannot be asked to trust elected officials to not abuse their powers.
Without the full thrust of the state and the readiness for it, it's still gonna take some time. And I do appreciate that the government itself has to create the capacity and to fulfill the expectations. So my lamentation was for the late start. So I'm understanding that they have to do the due diligence, not that they have made a start of it. I'm just hopeful that we get there in the shortest possible time, effectively.
Well, still to come on our news tonight, more protection for homeowners and renters. More from our recent interview with the head of the Bar Association. Stay with us.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. Topping news tonight.
COVID-19 remains a serious threat.
Coronavirus COVID-19 has disrupted our economy, tourism industry, educational system, and put our healthcare facilities and professionals on high alert. Are you prepared? Do you have all the facts? Stay tuned to this network for the very latest news and information on this global pandemic. You're watching our news on this majority rule holiday. Welcome back. The Bar Association is hoping to agitate for some changes in the laws governing home ownership and rentals. The Bar president outlined his 2022 agenda to our Berthany McDermott.
Heading into a new legal year, Bar Association President Khalil Parker says there are several key issues it is looking to tackle this year. Topping that list is housing reform. He says government's concern should be home security, not home ownership.
The government should be concerned with home security, not necessarily home ownership. I think people should feel secure in their homes. I think the economic realities, particularly post-COVID-19, have demonstrated that not everybody's going to be able to afford their own home. Not everybody's going to afford their dream home.
Moments after being sworn in as Minister of Housing and Transport back in September, JoBeth Colby-Davis said the plan is to build homes for Bahamians. She said the focus will be on how to tackle building homes and making Bahamians homeowners. Parker says the aim is for legislation to be drafted that will also focus on rental properties. He says the legislation will seek to protect the rights of both landlords and tenants.
Not only do we have to preserve and protect the rights of tenants in their rented accommodation, but we also have to preserve and protect the rights of the landlord to their investment property. And I think that if we pay attention to that particular sector and make sure that people feel secure in rented accommodation, it will be a significant relief to a great majority of Bahamians.
But that's not all. Parker says the regulation will also speak to how rent is increased and priced. Over time, many Bahamians have expressed outrage over what many felt were outrageously priced rental units.
I think that there has to be a rationalization of it. I think that at the end of the day, there could be regulation as to how rent is increased, so that cannot be a tool of eviction, and all of that is bundled in the protection of or the security of home ownership, and or the security of housing. And what I would also say is that on the opposite side, the process of creating those regulations has to be informed by landlords. They have to be able to participate so that people get returns on their investment.
Now, Parker is hoping to meet with the Housing Minister and Attorney General to discuss the matter. Meanwhile, he says the legislation will allow tenants to express complaints without fear of retribution.
You also have a situation where somebody is renting a home and there's a problem with the light fixture, and they complain to the landlord, and the landlord say either you live here in the dark or you hit the bricks XYZ. So we have to create an environment where tenants who are entitled to expect decent, habitable accommodation for the rent they pay to be able to articulate those complaints without retaliation. And you also have a situation where many landlords will tell you that when it's time for eviction, their experience at the magistrate's court is less than desirable.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
A group of volunteers at the First Baptist Church now know the real meaning of the phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words, or in this case, a viral moment. A simple photo of a giant pot of rice brought a whole lot of attention. Our Kyle Walk-in decided to see for himself.
We come here 7 o'clock on Wednesday morning, and we start cooking, if we can cook soup, we do boil our soup, do everything. If we can cook rice, we cook salt beef and rice with bean in it and everything.
It was a moment Eleanor Williams couldn't believe. Every Wednesday morning, she's up bright and early making soup and other dishes for the less fortunate at First Baptist Church. But after this picture surfaced with a smiling Eleanor stirring a giant pot of rice went viral, her phone hasn't stopped ringing.
My son come in there and he say, I was sitting in the front of him, he come say, who this is? I say, this me? He said, well, everybody, all my friends, them saying, boy, Michi, your mother. I said, so he said, my other son come, he was over the bridge and see lion. He come say, everybody, all white people, or everybody say, I got 1,000-something viewers.
Williams laughs at the moment. As we stand next to the pot, you can't help but notice it's much smaller in person, but still pretty big.
This pot looked much bigger on the picture.
I could bathe in this. So, that's it, you know.
How hard is it to cook in this big pot?
Huh?
How hard is it to cook in this big pot?
This pot cook 40 pounds of rice. Right. And it ain't hard.
This pot can cook an impressive 40 pounds of rice. Williams says while she was taken aback by the moment, she's happy to help the church feed those in need. But here's another thing you probably wouldn't know by looking at the picture. This pot of rice was actually cooked by a man, Charles Cox, who only showed up to help cook that day.
Every Wednesday they feed the homeless here. And they probably once every other month I come here and give them help and out free of charge. No cost, no nothing to them.
Now the question, how do you cook such a big pot of rice?
What I do is I measure my water by the handles. So I know I'm going to cook 40 pounds of rice this morning. So I'll mark it to the first dot right here. So when I mark it, I know only 40 pounds of rice go in here, no more than that.
So that's the water?
That's the water level.
Ah.
So that's how I measure my rice.
Despite the recent bit of attention, Williams says she wants people to remember those they do it for. For Our News, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
Thanks a lot, Kyle. Great story. I do have one question, though. I would love to know how the rice tasted. Looks really scrumptious. Still to come tonight, here on Our News, a television director talks creative careers. Details when we return.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. Topping news tonight.
COVID-19 remains a serious threat.
Coronavirus COVID-19 has disrupted our economy, tourism industry, educational system, and put our healthcare facilities and professionals on high alert. Are you prepared? Do you have all the facts? Stay tuned to this network for the very latest news and information on this global pandemic. This is Our News. Thanks for staying with us. Local programming and commercials with local talent are a commonplace here at Rev Media. The man making it all happen is Rev Media Vice President David Burrows. He says the key is giving local actors, directors and producers access to the right platform.
Cable Bahamas has a megaphone, and I took it as a personal responsibility that whatever we did, whatever we put on air, whatever we put out into the media, that it showed the professionalism of Bahamians in particular, that we are a cut above where, and what you see throughout the work that we have done, you can compare not just to the region, but around the world. And that has always been something that we have strived for, is that we are world class. We don't measure ourselves against the region and local companies. We measure ourselves against Comcast, against DirecTV, against all of the major companies around the world.
Burrows, who has a background in theater, says it really all comes down to telling a good story.
Before coming to cable, and continuing since I've been at cable, I've been an actor, director, writer, producer. For the theater, I've done a few parts on television and movies and so forth. So part of my degree was theater as well. So storytelling is very important. And then being an actor in this particular community, and in the early days, actors for doing television commercials and doing radio commercials really didn't get too much pay for those types of things because the market is so small. And so it was always something that I wanted to push local talent in particular in our ads. And it's something that we have continued throughout throughout Cable Bahamas, really starting even before signing Debbie Ferguson in 2001. We've always promoted local talent.
And when it comes to local programming, he says,
we've spent over $1.5 million in local programming since I've taken over Rev Media as VP of Media. So we have right now, for example, Goombay Kids is up for multiple awards across the world. India, they're being invited to major festivals because of their work, and that's all supported by Cable Bahamas and Rev Media. So continuing to push that, continuing to develop news, to continue to develop social media. We're right now the #1 in terms of social media in the country, in terms of our reach, in terms of the audience size. So our goal is to continue to grow.
And when we come back, a look at how a local TV blockbuster all came about. Stay with us.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. Topping news tonight.
COVID-19 remains a serious threat.
Coronavirus COVID-19 has disrupted our economy, tourism industry, educational system, and put our healthcare facilities and professionals on high alert. Are you prepared? Do you have all the facts? Stay tuned to this network for the very latest news and information on this global pandemic. One of the projects we are most proud of here at RTV is an RTV's original show called Goombay Kids. It's a kids show made for Bahamians by Bahamians. Tonight, we take a look at how this local TV blockbuster actually came about.
I pitched her on the idea of making it a little bit more scripted, because before it was more segments and there wasn't like a through line for the story, and I felt like adding that element to it would take it to the next level.
With that, Monroe put his directing, producing, and camera skills to work.
There's a preconditioned thought about what local Bahamian content for television and film looks like. And because of that, there isn't as much support for it. So with Goombay Kids, we just wanted to break that glass and give audiences something that, like, oh my goodness, like, who made that? Like, they sound like us. Like, that kid just say bite, mother's sick, dread.
When the new season aired in 2021, Monroe says they hoped audiences would be blown away.
We wanted the show to be able to compete, not just locally, but internationally.
Monroe wasn't always a creative. He started working in his father's auto shop at a younger age, but felt a calling to pursue filmmaking. His advice to anyone who is considering a creative path is to put in the work and be disciplined.
Whatever it is that you want to do, know that it's not going to be like a walk in the park. And once you get that part of it out of your head, then it's just a matter of time before you succeed.
Follow RTV Originals on Facebook for more Goombay Kids. And it is, in fact, a great show. If you haven't had an opportunity to see it, I encourage you to definitely take a look. Well, that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. On behalf of the entire team here, I'm Jerome Sawyer. On this Majority Rule holiday, we'll see you right back here tomorrow night. Be sure, if you haven't done so already, enjoy the rest of your holiday.